In psychology, they say that one of the most invisible prisons is the trap of the past. A person may walk to the present, plan for the future, laugh with others, and look alive. But deep inside, part of them remains locked in yesterday. Old memories replay like broken records. Old mistakes rise like ghosts. Old wounds ache as if they never healed. The body grows older. The days move forward, but the mind stays behind, circling the same rooms of memory over and over again. At first, it feels natural. After all, who can forget moments that shaped them? A betrayal, a loss, a failure. These events cut so deeply that they become chapters written in fire. The mind tells itself, asterisk, if I keep revisiting this, I will understand it. If I understand it, I will finally let it go. Asterisk, but instead of release, the opposite happens. The more the past is replayed, the more power it holds, until yesterday begins to suffocate today. Psychologists explain that this phenomenon is tied to unresolved emotions. What is not expressed, what is not grieved, what is not accepted, does not fade, it freezes. Like ice beneath the surface of a river, it blocks the natural flow of life. People who cannot forgive, cannot mourn, cannot forgive themselves, end up carrying pieces of the past as if they were happening still. The brain cannot always distinguish between memory and reality, so the body reacts as if the pain is fresh. Heart rate rises, anxiety surges, sadness returns, even if the wound is years old. For some, the trap is guilt. Asterisk, if only I had done differently. Asterisk, for others, it is anger. Asterisk, how could they have done this to me? Asterisk, and for many, it is longing. Asterisk, those days were better. I will never feel that way again. Asterisk, each form of attachment ties the soul backward, anchoring it to moments that cannot be changed. In psychology, they say that the trap of the past is not proof of weakness. It is proof of humanity. We hold on because we cared, because we felt deeply, because the moments mattered. But unless we learn how to carry the past without becoming its prisoner, it will continue to shape the present in ways we never intended. In psychology, they say that the trap of the past rarely announces itself loudly. It appears in the smallest details of daily life. People think they have moved on, but the past seeps through in how they love, how they work, how they see themselves. What is unresolved becomes a filter through which every new experience is judged, turning the present into an echo of yesterday. In relationships, the past often dictates reactions more than the present partner does. A person who was betrayed once may carry suspicion into every new connection, questioning loyalty even where there is no evidence of deceit. A partner's delayed reply to a message becomes not just a delay. It becomes a reminder of abandonment from years ago. Small disagreements flare into larger conflicts, not because of what is happening now, but because of old wounds that never healed. The past whispers, asterisk, be careful. Don't trust. Don't get too close. Asterisk, and so intimacy becomes fragile, haunted by ghosts invisible to anyone else. At work, the trap manifests as perfectionism or fear of failure. Someone who is shamed for mistakes in childhood grows into an adult terrified of error. Every task feels like a test. Every critique feels like rejection. Achievements are dismissed quickly. Asterisk, it's not enough. I need to do more. Asterisk, the past sits like an invisible boss, harsher than any real supervisor, keeping the person in a state of permanent anxiety. What was once a moment of shame becomes a lifelong script. Asterisk, if I fail, I will not be loved. Asterisk, in friendships, old pain can create walls. A person abandoned by friends long ago may keep new ones at a distance, never letting them in fully. They laugh, they socialize, but they never reveal their true self, afraid that history will repeat. Others cling too tightly, fearing that silence or absence means they are being forgotten again. The past dictates the rhythm, either too much distance or too much closeness, neither of which allows friendship to feel free. Perhaps the most damaging is how the past shapes the inner dialogue. Mistakes replay endlessly in the mind. Asterisk, why did I say that? Why did I trust them? Why wasn't I stronger? Asterisk, failures become permanent identities. I failed becomes asterisk, I am a failure. Asterisk, over time. The person cannot tell where the past ends and the present begins, because their sense of self is trapped in old stories. They wear labels given long ago, forgetting that they were written in temporary ink, not permanent stone. Psychologists explain that this is how the past colonizes the present, not through memory itself, but through repetition. The brain, wired to learn from danger, keeps replaying painful moments as if practice could prevent them from happening again. But instead of protection, it creates paralysis. The person does not grow safer. They grow smaller. In psychology, they say that the trap of the past becomes most dangerous when people stop realizing they are trapped at all. They think, this is just who I am, when in truth, it is only who they became after yesterday's pain. And until that distinction is made, the past will continue to hold the pen that writes today's story. In psychology, they say that the reason we cling to the past is not weakness, but fear. The past, no matter how painful, is familiar. It is known territory, and the mind often prefers known pain to unknown freedom. To let go feels like erasing part of ourselves, like betraying the weight of what we endured. And so, instead of loosening the grip, we hold tighter, convinced that remembering is the same as honoring, and revisiting is the same as healing. One of the strongest chains is guilt. People replay mistakes endlessly, as if rehearsing them could change the outcome. Asterisk, if only I had said something different. If only I had acted sooner. If only I had been braver. Asterisk guilt convinces the heart that punishment is a form of redemption. The person carries a memory like a sentence, believing that suffering is proof of love or proof of responsibility. But guilt does not undo, it only binds. Psychologists remind us, guilt is meant to teach, not to imprison. Another chain is anger. Betrayals and injustices carve deep scars, and the mind insists, asterisk, if I let this go, I let them win. If I release it, I excuse them. Asterisk, so the person holds on, clutching the ember of rage. But in time, the ember burns not the offender, but the one who holds it. Anger, unprocessed, transforms into bitterness, souring every new experience. The past becomes not a story remembered, but a weapon carried into every tomorrow. Perhaps the most seductive chain is nostalgia. Unlike guilt or anger, nostalgia feels sweet, almost comforting. We replay golden moments, thinking, asterisk, those are the best years. I'll never feel that way again. Asterisk, what was once joy turns into longing, and longing into despair. The present feels empty by comparison, and the future feels hopeless. Psychologists call this the rosy retrospection bias, the tendency to romanticize the past, forgetting its imperfections and condemning the present for failing to measure up. Fear fuels them all. Fear that if we let go of guilt, we dishonor those we hurt. Fear that if we release anger, we invite injustice again. Fear that if we loosen nostalgia, we lose part of our identity. The mind whispers, asterisk, hold on, it is safer this way. Asterisk, but the truth is the opposite. Holding on chains us to moments that no longer exist, while life continues without us. In psychology, they say that the past holds us not because it is stronger than us, but because we confuse holding with healing. We mistake suffering for loyalty, anger for justice, nostalgia for truth, and until we learn the difference, we remain bound, living in yesterday, unable to step fully into today. In psychology, they say that the trap of the past does not just live in memory. It reshapes the entire body, mind, and spirit. What is left unresolved does not remain a quiet thought in the background. It becomes a constant weight pressing on daily existence. Life begins to feel less like a flow forward and more like a loop, replaying scenes that should have ended long ago. Emotionally, the cost is overwhelming. People trapped in old wounds often find themselves reacting with disproportionate intensity to small triggers. A simple disagreement reopens the door to years of rejection. A forgotten invitation feels like proof of abandonment. The nervous system responds as if the past were happening all over again, dragging present emotions down to the level of yesterday's pain. Over time, this leads to anxiety, depression, and a chronic inability to trust moments of peace. Even joy feels suspicious, as though it's only a pause before the next hurt. Physically, the trap leaves marks as well. Suppressed grief and anger manifest as tension in the muscles, chronic fatigue, headaches, and shallow breathing. The body carries a memory long after the mind tries to forget. Psychologists often say, asterisk, the body keeps the score. Asterisk for someone stuck in the past. The body becomes a living archive of pain, replaying stress responses again and again until exhaustion becomes a new normal. Spiritually, the damage may be the deepest. Life loses its sense of flow and meaning. People begin to feel as if they are cursed to repeat the same patterns, as though destiny itself has turned against them. Hope shrinks. Dreams fade. Instead of reaching forward, the heart clings backward, refusing to release what cannot be undone. The soul begins to whisper, asterisk, what is the point of moving on if yesterday still owns me? Asterisk, the tragedy is that the past does not even need to be terrible to become a trap. Even memories of better days can imprison, convincing the person that the best has already been lived. Nostalgia, as sweet as it feels, can turn bitter when it convinces us that the present is only a shadow of what once was. In psychology, they say that the trap of the past exhausts us because it steals not only today but tomorrow. While the mind keeps circling the same story, life moves on without us. And unless we learn to release what is frozen, we risk becoming ghosts in our own lives, alive in body, but forever wandering in yesterday. In psychology, they say that one of the most dangerous effects of the past is its ability to script the future. When memories remain unresolved, they do not simply stay behind. They step into present disguised as instincts, choices, and patterns. The person believes they are making free decisions, but in truth, they are reliving yesterday in new forms, repeating old wounds under new names. In love, this repetition is striking. Someone betrayed once may unconsciously seek out partners who echo that same dynamic, as if drawn to familiar pain. They might mistake chaos for passion, distance for strength, or neglect for independence, because those patterns mirror the relationships of the past. Psychologists call this repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate the very wounds we never healed, hoping this time the outcome will be different. Yet more often than not, it ends the same, confirming the original hurt and deepening the prison. At work, the cycle continues. A person criticized harshly as a child might become an adult who avoids risk at all costs, or one who overworks themselves into exhaustion to prove their worth. Opportunities are missed not because of lack of skill, but because the past whispers, asterisk, you will fail just like before. Asterisk, others sabotage success by procrastinating, quitting too soon, or provoking rejection before it can arrive, living out an old script of, I am not enough. Even in friendships, repetition appears. Someone who once felt abandoned may cling too tightly, driving others away, or withdraw too quickly, never allowing closeness. Ironically, these very behaviors create the very rejection they fear, reinforcing the belief that history always repeats. The past shapes not only what they expect from others, but how they behave toward them. Perhaps the most subtle way the past dictates the future is through self-image. A child told they were unworthy may grow into an adult who cannot see their own strengths. Even when praised, they dismiss it. Even when loved, they doubt it. The words spoken years ago echo louder than the words spoken today. Identity itself becomes a mirror cracked by history, reflecting distortion instead of truth. Psychologists emphasize that repetition compulsion is not masochism. It is an attempt at mastery. The mind recreates the old wound, hoping to rewrite it, hoping that this time, love will stay, anger will heal, shame will disappear. But unless the past is faced directly, the pattern only deepens. Life becomes not a series of new chapters, but rewrites of the same painful story. In psychology, they say that the trap of the past is not only about remembering, it is about reliving. Until the cycle is broken, yesterday will continue to script tomorrow, and freedom will remain just out of reach. In psychology, they say that the first step toward escaping the trap of the past is awareness. For years, a person may believe their struggles are unique, their pain random, their patterns unconnected. But then a moment arrives, sometimes through therapy, sometimes through reflection, sometimes through sheer exhaustion, when they see the thread linking it all together. The partners who feel familiar, the fears that always return, the choices that end the same way, all of them echo yesterday. What seemed like chance is revealed as repetition. This realization is both painful and liberating. Painful, because it forces the person to admit they have been living under the shadow of old wounds. Liberating, because recognition is the beginning of freedom. What was unconscious becomes conscious, and consciousness breaks the cycle's strongest weapon, invisibility. Psychologists describe this as pattern recognition. It can come suddenly, an argument that feels too familiar, a failure that stings in the same old way, or it can emerge slowly through journaling, therapy, or conversations with trusted people who notice the repeating themes. The past loses some of its grip the moment it is named. From awareness, small acts of rebellion begin. A person who usually avoids conflict may finally speak up, trembling but firm. Asterisk, I need to say this. Asterisk, someone who always clings too tightly might practice giving space, learning that love does not vanish in silence. A worker driven by fear of failure may take a small risk, not to succeed, but to prove to themselves that failure no longer defines them. These shifts are not dramatic, but they are revolutionary, because each breaks a piece of the chain that once bound them. The critic inside resists, of course. It warns, asterisk, don't change. You'll get hurt again. Stay where it's safe. Asterisk, but awareness has already weakened its power. Once the person realizes the voice belongs not to the present, but to the past, they can begin to choose differently. And choice is the seed of freedom. In psychology, they say that awareness does not erase the past, but it transforms a relationship to it. Yesterday no longer writes today's story without permission. The pen is back in the person's hand, and with it comes a first glimpse of a future not chained to repetition. In psychology, they say that the art of letting go is one of the hardest lessons a human being can learn. The mind clings to the past because it believes that holding on protects us, that guilt proves love, that anger preserves justice, that nostalgia keeps joy alive. But psychologists remind us, clinging does not preserve, it paralyzes. Healing begins when we understand that letting go does not mean forgetting, excusing, or erasing. It means releasing the illusion that yesterday can still be changed. Forgiveness is often the first doorway. To forgive is not to deny the harm or excuse the wrong. It is to stop carrying the weight of what another person did. The offender may never apologize, may never understand, may never change. Forgiveness is not about them. It is about freeing ourselves from being chained to their actions. Anger kept for too long becomes poison, and the only cure is choosing to no longer drink it. Acceptance is the next step. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means acknowledgement. It is a quiet courage of saying, asterisk, this happened. It hurt. It shaped me. But it no longer defines me. Asterisk acceptance allows grief to flow instead of freeze. And grief, when allowed to flow, eventually leads to peace. Psychologists call this radical acceptance, meeting reality as it is, without resistance, so that healing can begin where denial ends. Letting go also requires releasing nostalgia's grip. It is tempting to believe the best is already past, but this belief robs the present of its value. Nostalgia, unchecked, becomes despair dressed as sweetness. The act of loosening its hold is not betrayal of cherished memories. It is an honoring of them. It is saying, asterisk, that was beautiful, and because I loved it, I will live fully now, instead of trying to relive what cannot return. Asterisk, the fear that stops many is the belief that if they let go, they will lose themselves. But psychologists emphasize the opposite. We are not our wounds, not our mistakes, not our golden days. We are the ones who lived through them, and we carry the power to live beyond them. Letting go is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new chapter. In psychology, they say that learning to let go is learning to trust life again. It is to stop dragging yesterday into today, to stop waiting for the past to rewrite itself, and to step into the freedom of presence. For the first time, the person is no longer a prisoner of what cannot be undone. They are the author of what comes next. In psychology, they say that the moment a person begins to let go of the past, their entire inner world shifts. The weight they carried for years does not vanish overnight, but begins to loosen, to soften, to lift. And with that lightening comes space. Space for new experiences, new emotions, and a self that is no longer defined by what once was. The first transformation appears in relationships. When guilt is released, people stop punishing themselves and finally allow love to enter without suspicion. When anger is loosened, closest feel safe again. Partners and friends are no longer shadows of old betrayals, but real companions in the present. When nostalgia is softened, people stop comparing today to yesterday and discover that joy has not ended. It simply takes new shapes. Suddenly, conversations deepen, hugs feel warmer, and silence between loved ones becomes peaceful instead of heavy. The second transformation unfolds in the sense of meaning. Life, once trapped in replay, regains direction. The person begins to see themselves not as a sum of wounds, but as a survivor who carries wisdom from them. Purpose emerges not in rewriting the past, but in shaping the present. They begin to ask different questions. Not asterisk, why did this happen to me? Asterisk, but asterisk, what can I create now? Asterisk, not asterisk, what did I lose? Asterisk, but asterisk, what can I build with what remains? Asterisk, the third transformation occurs within the self. When the past no longer dictates identity, the person rediscovers a gentler voice inside. They no longer define themselves by mistakes or scars, but by resilience, growth, and courage. Self-compassion blossoms. Asterisk, I did the best I could then. I know more now. I am still worthy of joy. Asterisk, the critic, once loud and relentless, begins to fade, replaced by a quieter truth, that they were never broken, only burdened. Finally, joy itself changes. It no longer depends on perfect circumstances or golden memories. It is found in ordinary moments. The taste of food, the laughter of friends, the feeling of sunlight, the sound of music. Presence, once impossible, becomes natural. What used to be overlooked becomes sacred. Happiness stops being a memory or a goal. It becomes a daily practice. In psychology, they say that letting go is not about erasing the past, but about reclaiming the present. It is not the end of memory, but the end of captivity. And when a person learns this, they discover that life was never waiting in yesterday. It was always here, patiently waiting for them to return. In psychology, they say that freedom begins the moment we stop trying to rewrite yesterday. The past is permanent, carved into memory, shaped by choices and moments that can never be repeated. For years, we fight this truth. We replay, we regret, we resent, we reach back. But the turning point comes when we finally understand. The past does not need to change for us to heal. We need to change our relationship with it. This shift is profound. Suddenly, the person realizes they are more than the sum of old wounds. They are not the betrayal that scarred them, not the mistake that haunts them, not even the golden season they long for. They are the witness, the survivor, the creator who carries yesterday's lessons into today's choices. The identity that once felt chained to memory begins to expand, to breathe, to grow. The past still lives, but differently. It becomes teacher, not jailer. Pain becomes wisdom, not punishment. Loss becomes gratitude for what was, not despair for what is gone. Even joy, remember, becomes a foundation for new joy, instead of a reason to mourn what can't return. Life feels lighter, not because the past is forgotten, but because it has been placed where it belongs. Behind us, not around us. Relationships change too. The person no longer expects a partner, a friend, or a family member to heal the wounds of others. They no longer project old betrayals onto new faces. Instead, they begin to meet people as they are, not as ghosts of those who hurt them before. This shift allows intimacy to blossom, trust to deepen, and love to feel possible again. Within the self, the most powerful transformation occurs. Self-forgiveness replaces self-punishment. Acceptance replaces denial. Presence replaces absence. The critic who once screamed, "You are broken because of the past," is answered by a calmer truth. Asterisk, you are whole because you survived it. Asterisk, the person finally sees themselves not as a victim of history, but as the author of the present. In psychology, they say that the trap of the past loses its power the moment we stop living as though yesterday is stronger than today. The past remains, it always will, but it is no longer the prison. It is the story, and we are the storyteller. And when we step into that role, life begins again, not as a repetition of what was, but as a creation of what can be.